Le Mans 24 Hours, where Ferrari was victorious with the hypercar. As we reach the halfway point in our Ferrari Challenge North America season for 2023, great racing awaits. Welcome to Montreal. Hello everyone, and as the nice man said, welcome to Montreal. Trofeo Pirelli and Copichel qualifying 2, and this qualifying session is to set the grid for the race to come tomorrow. We have a race today, the qualifying for that has already been done, and the grid has been set. Halfway through then for our 2023 season, having been to Miami and Texas and Road Atlanta, and here we are in Montreal in Canada, ahead of Sonoma, Road America, and of course the glittering Finale Mondiale, which will be held in Tuscany in Italy in Mugello at the end of October. So this is precisely where we are then, as you can see on our circuit location map here in Montreal. In support of Formula One, please follow us on @Ferrari Races. Be part of the social media family. We would love you to do that and become part of us and really immerse yourself in everything that's great about the prancing horse. 4.361 kilometers this testing circuit, 14 turns, 6 of them left and 8 of them are right-handers, and the circuit really does test here at Montreal, and as if the circuit itself was not testing enough, then there are other things that can make it even more challenging for our Ferrari Challenge drivers, just like the weather, really. Qualifying was in torrential rain earlier on for the race to come today. This is qualifying 2 for the race tomorrow, where, as you can see, track conditions still very, very damp, and subsequently the start of this qualifying session is with a full course yellow as well. As we watch the 126 car of Eric Marston make his way out of the pit lane, along with all of our Ferrari Challenge drivers, are all together, moulded together in one qualifying session. Whether you are Trofeo Pirelli Am, Copichel or Copichel Am, they're all in the melting pot together, as indeed am I with Shea Adam, and there's no better place to be because we're in the warm and in the dry, Shea.
Good morning, Dave, and yes, how grateful I am to be in the booth with you today instead of out there in the pit lane in these very difficult conditions. And this session, I fear, will be more difficult for our drivers than the previous one because the lack of consistency. It was rain for the entirety of the first practice session. This session, there's nothing falling from the sky, and the track will continue to dry out and progress as the session goes on. 30 minutes, as you rightly mentioned, for our 35 cars that qualified in race number 1. 37 on the entry list total. We'll see if we get the other 2 back for this session. But the track should get better and better, and the Pirelli wets, as they were when they left the pit lane, will wear down to be almost Pirelli dries by the end, so we could see faster times than we got in this morning session.
Absolutely pinpoint accurate. I think you're right. I think the fast times are going to come right at the end of the session, and as you can see, drivers weaving from side to side here. Just to see where the grip is or isn't, as Matt Gojewski is doing right there. And of course, the thing is, when you have a track like this, Shea, which is wet but drying, as inevitably it will in the course of the next 27 minutes or so, the Pirelli wet weather tyres, they are designed to operate in, of course, wet weather, hence the title. And therefore you may see unorthodox lines being used by the drivers, I think, during this qualifying session to make sure that they keep those wet weather tyres within their operational temperature window.
Yes, and also there's a very different wet racing line to the dry racing line. So as the track dries out, it will dry out faster on the wet racing line because that's the one that the 35 Ferraris will be circulating on. So in effect, you're sabotaging yourself because the line that you want to be on when it's dry will indeed be the wetter one. It's going to be a very interesting dichotomy to see it all play out and to see which drivers react how. And of course, the big problem that we saw earlier, traffic. How are these cars going to space themselves out when they can see each other more clearly, something they didn't get the benefit of this morning?
You're absolutely right. As we do go green now, the full course yellow is lifted, so it's every driver for himself right now. And still, there is a lot of standing water out there on the track, as evidenced by the spray that's coming off the back of the Makoyevsky car that we can see here, car number 21. And that is very much a moot point because visibility and space on the track are two really critical things, particularly in qualifying. And Matt right now, who boded very well during his qualifying session earlier to set the grid for the race today, he'll see and he'll just explore and test exactly how far he can push his 488 Challenge Evo on this drying track.
Yeah, and I think you're correct on that, Dave. And he's taking this very gingerly through the section of track 3, 4, and 5. He actually put on the brakes at a point in time where you normally wouldn't be braking, so perhaps the grip level's still a bit below what Matt Krzyzewski was expecting. We have to say also hello to Alessandro Balzan, longtime Ferrari driver who coaches Matt Krzyzewski, tuning in from VIR, having just done his own qualifying session. Matt is doing you proud, Ale. He put the car on pole for race number 1, and now let's see if he can do it for tomorrow's race as well.
Just last weekend, LA and I were having a conversation. It was LA cabs as he was ferrying drivers from the paddock on a moped. I have to say, perhaps one of the fastest cab drivers I've ever met.
I think that's not too hard to beat, especially for Balzan, a driver who's won just about every major race that we have in North America. So he's a very accomplished driver, and clearly helping his student, Matt Krzyzewski, very much this year, as Matt has a solid lead in the championship coming into today's race. 77 points versus 64 for second in points. Jason McCarthy, and traffic is coming into play on the front straight. That is a car from the Copa Shell class, just slightly hampering Matt Krzyzewski. It's Cyril Choksi, actually. We didn't see Cyril in this morning's qualifying session.
We didn't. You're absolutely right. We didn't. Now, I was going to say there was a nice battle going on between three drivers in the earlier qualifying session. Lo and behold, Martin Burrows, Jason McCarthy and Matt Krzyzewski are going to go ding-dong once again, I would suggest, during this qualifying session. But already laying down the rubber and laying the marker for Ferrari of Palm Beach is Rosberg, who has gone very quick, and he's third fastest overall. And Frank Szczesniak then is the best of the Shell drivers to show, but we are still in the very early stages of this qualifying session. And there you can see just how treacherous it can be as the back end overtakes the front. And a heart in the mouth moment for Frank then as he gets it pointing back in the right direction again, but proving that you're really on a knife edge, Shay, aren't you, in terms of just how far you can push these cars?
You really are. My apologies, Dave. That was just such a scary moment for our Copa Shell pole sitter for today's race. So it gives you an idea, a man who clearly knows how to go quickly around this circuit, just missing the braking point a little bit, the rears clenching up, and then ultimately spinning the car around with the back end, as you say, completing the lap time a little bit sooner than the front end of the car.
Very nicely put. And looking at the rear view screen was Tony Davis as he watched Frank pirouetting, as it were. So it's Martin Burrows who is quickest at the moment for Trofeo Pirelli. Rosberg for Pirelli Am. Szczesniak, the very man that we saw dancing on the ice almost, who is the quickest Shell driver. And Lisa Clark, once again, is the quickest of the Shell Am drivers. As we watch Martin Burrows, the local driver who was just bested, wasn't he, to pole position in the earlier qualifying session. He'll want to right the wrongs of earlier today.
Yes, he will. And Martin Burrows very clearly thriving and racing in a home environment, able to eat poutine and have maple syrup on everything. This is what Canadians live for. And more importantly, as we saw him hanging 10 out the window on his in-lap, he wants to put on a show for his fellow Canadians.
Yes, and he got past Anthony DiCarlo just a moment ago, and that was exciting to watch. And just getting on the grass there.
Justin Rothberg.
It is Justin, who, of course, is the quickest of the Trofeo Pirelli Am drivers. Chuck Whittle getting it very close to him in terms of the times. But, again, Justin Rothberg. So we're seeing these quick drivers as they push us and try and go just a little bit quicker, still further. It, as I said in our session earlier, it can very quickly bite you on the bottom. And Lisa Clark in car number 127 right now, who also had a really good battle with Dan Cornish for the top spot earlier on in our previous qualifying session for the Shell Am drivers. He's doing very well at the moment, sitting it on P1 for the 127 car.
She is, and she's actually caught right back up to the tail of McCade Wang, a driver who races in Trofeo Pirelli AM, so 2 categories above the one in which she participates. And right now she's hanging on to the back of that car. So Lisa Clark feeling very comfortable in these conditions, pushing well. And I'm so impressed, Dave, by the amount of water that these Pirelli wets are moving. The spray is not because it's actively rain falling from the sky. That's what the tires are grabbing off the pavement and chucking into the air. It makes it look like it's raining. That is a great amount of water. Just a testament to the grip levels of these Pirellis.
I've had many conversations in broken Italian with Lucio, who is head of Pirelli Motorsport for Ferrari Challenge, and the science he's told me with regards to just how many litres of water our Pirelli wet weather tyres can dispel in the course of a second is truly breathtaking. What's not quite so breathtaking is my memory, and I can't remember how many litres it was, but it was a lot.
It was an impressive number.
It was.
Yes. Well, another impressive number is Martin Burrows, who is at the top of the charts at 148.080. In this morning session, we saw one time that was ultimately disallowed because of track limits into the 47s. I think we're going to get 47s, perhaps even 46s during this session.
Wow. It's a bold ambition, but as is often the case with you, Shay, irritatingly, you're more times than not completely right. So let's see as we watch the number 11 car of Jason McCarthy, who's currently P3, make that P4, because Carlos de Quesada has just gone the second fastest of everyone with a 148.772. As around goes another car, Shay. Was that Musial?
It was 2.0, who got a helping hand from Michael Petramalo. Just a little tap on the back of his car right in the middle, going into the braking zone of the corner. And then just for good measure, a kiss on the right-hand side of the bumper as well, going through the corner. But both cars able to continue, and 2.0 should be no worse for the wear from that.
Jason McCarthy, we're watching right now then, going to try and improve on his current P4 place. Shout out to David Veronin, who is quickest of the Shell drivers, and shout out also to Dan Cornish, who is now the best of the Shell AM drivers as they quietly go about their business. And we watch Jason McCarthy then, who I think is perhaps being thwarted just a little bit by traffic ahead of him, and this may cause him a problem.
But that is Roberto Perena, as off has gone Mike Luley, one of our
Yes.
Canadian runners. That's car number 112 in the Copa Shell class. Hopefully he'll be able to get it pointed back in the right direction. That's just after the exit of the hairpin. Let's see, does he just, a little bit too much rear grip that he wasn't expecting, and it pitched the car around sideways, and indeed the red flag is now out, so everybody will have to return to the pit lane, and they can go line up and wait for the green flag to come back out, but it means that any lap time set now, so for example, Perena and McCarthy, as they have just crossed our finish, those times will not count.
So the car of Michael Luley then, that has either got to be recovered from there or certainly got out of a position of potential strife. And that's the thing here, Shay, that we also have to bear in mind. This, of course, is very much a street circuit without acres and acres of runoff area. And therefore, you're never, A, far from a wall, and
Yes.
B, that, of course, having consequences on the rest of the runners as well. And with the track conditions being pretty treacherous, to be honest with you, there was absolutely nothing that race control could do other than to stop that or suspend the session at that point.
No, exactly, and they gave him time to move. Race control, very fair, not just pushing the big red button to self-destruct right away. They do give all the competitors an opportunity to clear it if they can. Clearly, Mike Luley unable to continue, but Martin Burrows will be very pleased with that, is once again hanging 10, saying thank you to all the marshals around the circuit. And on behalf of everyone at Ferrari Challenge, we also thank you for giving your time to allow us to come out and motor race week in and week out, the race officials all around the world. But yes, Martin Burrows sitting P1, he'll be okay with the fact that this is red flag and it's taking away time from other people to try and take away his time.
Of course. Let me also offer my thanks to those volunteers who, quite rightly, Shay says, around the world we would not be able to enjoy the sport that we love without the dedication of those people who do fantastic work. So Martin Burrows then, best of Trofeo Pirelli drivers as we came to a close. Then it is Trofeo Pirelli AM. It's Brian Cook. For Shell, Dave Veronin. For Shell Am drivers, Dan Cornish. That's the way it looks as the session is suspended for the recovery of the stricken 112 car of Mike Luley, who went around completely on his own. There was no assist or support. It was just as Mike tried to extend still further the grip available to him in these difficult conditions. The car just got away from him.
So we have had, 36 cars set lap times so far in this session. Everybody getting an opportunity, which has been nice. No, we've had 37. All 37 have been out on the track, so that's good. A change from this morning session as well. Perhaps we had some faulty transponders this morning with some of the cars not getting times, but almost everyone has made it back into the pit lane. And now, indeed, we are showing, 36 cars in the pit lane. The best time for the Trofeo Pirelli Am, have we talked about Cookie yet in this session? I don't believe we have.
The Cookie Monster, as you so lovingly refer to him.
Yes, he's a very lovely man, Brian Cook, who managed to take the first pole position of the season back at Homestead Miami Speedway, representing Ferrari of Seattle. So, of course, he's doing well in these rainy conditions. That makes perfect sense. But Brian Cook, who is coached by Mark Miller, so a man who's very familiar with circuits like this, able to help Brian to adapt to this condition and these circuits. He did not race here last year. You wouldn't know it looking at that lap time, now would you, Dave?
No, that's a very, very fair point. He's looked very good. I want to explore, as we've got this red flag situation, all the cars back in the pit lane, and there is Martin Burrows then saying a big thank you to all those that support from a voluntary point of view our sport. This is just a classic example of why sometimes it's really, really good, isn't it, to get a banker lap in, because we never know what's going to happen, Shane. You and I, having been part of hundreds and thousands of races around the world, we've seen where qualifying sessions have been suspended, and those that were choosing to really, really push towards the end of the session, their strategy has gone south because of things like this.
Yeah, it's so true, and it can have a knock-on effect as the season goes on, because you think about qualifying and, all right, it's a 30-minute race, but if it's pouring later on in the 30-minute race, Martin Burrows and Carlos de Quesada are going to be the two happiest drivers, because they're going to be the only two with clear vision going into turn one. Hello, Richard, by the way, who's our pit lane official, who's standing right there with the umbrella. You think about certain drivers who are a bit further down. Dylan Medler, very much out of place. He's 9th in the class. Now, Dylan is a guy who got his first pole position at the last weekend that we were racing at Road Atlanta, so he knows what it's like to be on the front row. He's going to be a lot less happy being on the 5th row.
You're right. As we look at the 163 car then of Dan Cornish, and Dan at the moment for Ferrari of Austin is pole position within class, because very unusually in the Ferrari Challenge, what we've got is all of our competitors qualifying at the same time in the same session. Ordinarily, each of the categories in Ferrari Challenge, whether it's Trofeo Pirelli Am, Copa Shell or Copa Shell Am, Shay, they all go out for a 15-minute dash for cash, really. It's their own qualifying session, isn't it? And there is Luca Vigani that I was talking about just a few moments ago, just underneath us where we're commentating from, with his Pirelli jacket and hood up as well. But yes, normally it's a very short, sharp qualifying for the drivers, isn't it? Whereas they do this time around here in Montreal, they get a full 30-minute qualifying session, which from a time point of view, perhaps advantageous. From a number of cars on the track at the same time point of view, perhaps less advantageous.
Well, and isn't that the truth? Because all of a sudden you're used to being on track with for example, the Copa Shell class we've got on the screen right now in graphic form, 11 cars total. So you're used to 10 other vehicles around you. Well, in this session, you're dealing with 36 other vehicles around you. And the track hasn't gotten any bigger. That's the other factor with this.
Very good, very good. Yes, you're right, it hasn't. We're looking at the Shell Am drivers right now with the graphics, with Cornish, Cleveland, Clark, the top three. Dana Goodwin, then Jeff Nunberg, and then you can see the rest of the order there as well, as we take a look at some of the spectators that have made their way into the circuit to enjoy the qualifying session from the Ferrari Challenge. The prancing horse adorned, of course, across all of the 488 Challenge Evo cars, and none more so than the car number 38 that we look at right now, which, of course, is the car of Michael Petramalo.
And I'm happy to report to all the fans trackside, Ferrari will be victorious this weekend in at least 2 races. I do cheer for that in all 3, but still, that is wonderful to be able to say to all the fans sitting trackside, and to the 2 lovely ladies who are enjoying the bagel and lox. I'm very envious of that as well. Good food choice, as there are so many good food choices in Montreal, so many beautiful restaurants to choose from. But right now, all the drivers just are hungry for one thing, and that is a potential pole position, as now we are down below 11 minutes to go in this session. Still red flagged, still no indication of going back to green.
And the thing is, and this is conjecture on my part, and Shay will put me right, as she so often does. Often when we get a red flag situation in qualifying in Ferrari Challenge, which, it has to be honest, doesn't happen very, very often, but if it does, ordinarily the clock would stop and the time would be held. However, because it is such a tight schedule here in Montreal, where of course we are supporting Formula One, that means there isn't the wiggle room, if you like, within the schedule to allow that to happen, Shay.
Yes, and that is the big difference, Dave, is that this weekend, unlike any of the other weekends across the Ferrari Challenge calendar, is support. Normally, Ferrari Challenge is the main show. We get all the track time. We can do with it whatever we choose. If we need to delay a session for 5 minutes for the possibility of making the track slightly cleaner, potentially safer for our competitors, giving them another line to race on, we can do that. And that's part of the beauty of this series. It's all aimed for the Ferrari drivers. Unfortunately, when we're running with Formula One, we are dependent on another series, and we do give way to them gladly, but it does mean that the format of almost everything this weekend changes, Dave.
You're right, as we could see evidence of the Ferrari Lake Forest crew who've been busy with the all-red gaffer tape on the back end of Dave Musial 2.0's car, following his couple of little kisses earlier on with other cars. This suspension has at least allowed the team to apply some gaffer tape to some slightly errant panels that were somewhat misshaped. But it's going to be a real dash for cash now, because we're, as we speak, we're down to 9 minutes of the session remaining, Shay, and 36, 37 cars going to be dashing out of the pit lane. It's going to be very busy, and whoever is at the front of the queue is in a gun seat, I would say.
Yeah, and what a lovely visual we've been treated to with this aerial camera, looking straight down on all the cars, getting to appreciate all the different liveries that are brought by all these different drivers and dealerships. Ultimately, each team, yes, there are teams that run, but the dealerships are the ones that get the championships. As Mark Muzo with the best bumper message in the world, I love my wife, but then you read it closer, I love it when my wife lets me go racing. Mark, we love that too, and we are grateful to have you over from Toronto, another one of our Canadian competitors this weekend.
Mark, I don't know how you get away with that, because I wouldn't.
Have you not looked at that up close before, Dave?
No,
It's
I haven't.
great.
No, I haven't. Thank you for sharing that, Shay. Yeah, I would get a slap. Hello, hello, and welcome to Montreal. Sorry that the cars are not out on track. We have no indication yet. Oh, yeah, as I speak, as if I am the voice of magic. Thank
Curse
you.
of the commentator, but the other way around.
Yeah, a bit of positivity by way of a change. Here we go then, and let's get back to it. We have 7 3/4 minutes of qualifying remaining. That means 7 3/4 minutes for Martin Burrows, for Brian Cook, for Dave Veronin, and for Dan Cornish to hold on to their provisional race 2 pole positions within class. Let's see if they can do that over the remaining 7.5 minutes. It's going to be very, very exciting, that's for sure. And as you can see, drivers jostling for positions already as we speak, and Custodio Toledo. But there is the 177 car of David Veronin, who is at the moment top of the Shell drivers. Let's go back to qualifying, Shay.
Okay, drivers, remember, your tires have cooled off, the pressures have dropped. Take your time getting everything up to temperature. You don't want to go charging into a corner when your brakes are normally en fuego and very, very much able to help stop the car, and they're not because they've been sitting in the pit lane for about, 15 minutes. So we need everybody to remember patience. Conditions are changing. The track is drying out. It is still sprinkling a little bit in the air, but that doesn't mean go fast time is now. Get everything ready for go fast time in 4, maybe 5 minutes.
Very well said.
Let's
Racing drivers, knowing racing drivers as you and I both do, not one iota of note will have been taken of that, and they're just going to go for it straight away. But let's see. So we pick out some of the drivers here. The visibility, of course, when you're behind whoever is in the is at the front of the pack, visibility is always compromised. That continues to be the case, and we have but 6 minutes remaining of this session as the lights stream through the murk and the mire, and we look at the Custodio Toledo car, and there's David Veronin that we were mentioning just a few moments ago, and Shay was talking about the liveries across these Ferrari 488 Challenge Evo cars, which the team's very much involved in that, but the drivers also, they take some pride in how the cars look, and of course last thing they want to be doing is pushing too hard and changing the look of those cars in the final 5.5 minutes of this qualifying session. Let's see who can do what. Grip is still difficult. Custodio Toledo, well, he just lost the back end of the car just a moment ago. In fairness, that wasn't Custodio Toledo. It was indeed this car, the David Veronin car for Foreign Cars of Italia. So he's still pushing, despite the fact that his time of 1:49.949 means he is P1 within his category.
By quite a margin, too, over Ray Acosta, a man who had a good qualifying showing in the first session earlier today. Again, a man who calls Miami, Florida home, no stranger to driving in the rain, so these conditions will not faze anybody who is used to a little bit of wet weather, especially considering that we're in June now. But Canadian wet weather, oh, that is very different because the temperatures, as you rightly mentioned at the start of this session, they are not very high. Indeed, we are in the 50s for an ambient feels like right now. That's going to be very different as well for the drivers out there trying to get that heat into their cars.
One of the attractions for me, flying into the USA or to Canada to David Veronin nearly lost the back end of the car. Flying across to be part of this wonderful Ferrari Challenge racing here in North America is the fact that most oftentimes I'm flying into far superior weather to that we have in Europe. However, Shay, on this occasion, that isn't the case.
No, definitely not. And now watching Veronin just finishing the lap, let's see how much visibility he has because there are 2 cars ahead of him, kicking up quite a bit of spray. How was his time? It was better, so he gives himself a slightly bigger gap, but the change in the charts is Chuck Whittle up to first in the Trofeo Pirelli AM class.
Yeah, brilliant lap from Chuck Whittle then, who found the space to be able to deliver that. So as we speak, it is Burrows P1 in Trofeo Pirelli. Actually, change that. Tipex, Matt Krajewski goes to P1, Shay.
He does, and by quite a margin, 1.4 seconds for Krajewski over Burrows, who are together on track. Oh boy.
And now Jason McCarthy has gone P2, so it is Matt Krajewski P1, Jason McCarthy P2, Martin Burrows P3, then Carlos de Quesada. Cyril Choksi, in the meantime, has gone best of the Shell drivers with another very strong time, and that puts him a good margin ahead of the second best now, as around goes the number 29 car of Justin Rothberg, and getting collected as well, Shay.
I think he managed to not get smacked by the car coming behind, but that was a big hit for the left front for Rothberg, and chapeau, that was Dana Goodwin slamming on the brakes.
Doing a great job in just avoiding contact with that car.
Wow, mega mega reaction from Dana Goodwin, who had a good qualifying session earlier as well. But Rothberg blocking the track, and then pulls out right in front of Carlos de Quesada, who manages to avoid him. There was traffic further back as well, as Cookie had to get on the brakes hard. Wow, this is what happens when we race at Montreal and the confines are quite tight.
Fair play to all the drivers there. There's some very, very good avoidance, wasn't there? Goodness me. Yes, right. Now, Cyril Choksi, as I mentioned just before we saw that car going around, bear in mind, Shay, Cyril Choksi, a Shell driver, quicker than even the best of the Trofeo Pirelli AM drivers. That's a good showing from Cyril Choksi.
Really is, especially considering he did not post a time in qualifying this morning. Cyril, who's coached by Robbie Foley, who is elsewhere this weekend, that's going to be a different experience for him as well, having to learn from someone else's experience. As all of a sudden, we've got some movers, and Roberto Perena up to third, but 2.0 is up to fifth.
And Cameron Root has gone quickest in the Shell drivers. Just as we were extolling the virtues of Cyril Choksi, Cameron Root goes even quicker as we watch the car of Mark Musso and then the car of Lance Corley. And there is 2.0 then in the number 31 goes up to P5 in Trofeo Pirelli. I remind you, we've got Pirelli, we've got Pirelli AM, we've got Shell, and we've got Shell AM drivers all all qualifying in the same qualifying session. Although, actually, looking at some of the moves out there on track, you would think it is racing, Shay.
Yeah, you really would. These drivers are eager for the green flag to come out in only a couple hours' time for the first race of the weekend. But until then, they still have about 30 seconds left on qualifying to try and prove themselves and move themselves up the grid further for tomorrow's race, as Cameron Root has just done. He is now provisional pole sitter in Copa Shell, and Lisa Clark back to the point in Shell AM. Really good lap by Lisa that time around to get back ahead of Bruce Cleveland and then Dan Cornish.
I tell you what, the Shell AM competitiveness in qualifying, particularly between Clark, Cleveland and Cornish, all the C's there, has been absolutely brilliant. It's been really, really compelling, and well done to each of them as we watch the number 11 car of Jason McCarthy, who's currently P3. So Jason McCarthy, who was one of the front runners in our earlier qualifying session, and they're continuing, and there is Tony Davis. Where is Tony in the lineup here? Well, probably further back, P5 than he would like to be.
Yeah, Tony Davis in P5. That's not at all a sentence that we're used to saying. Tony Davis is normally up toward the 4 end of things. Now let's see. Checkered flag is waving. I'm waiting for McCarthy. Here he comes now to trigger the timing line. Does he improve? No. Who was that who just improved, though? It was Brian Cook. Brian Cook, P1. Tony Davis, P2. All is right with the world.
We knew that Tony was holding it in abeyance and going to deliver it right at the end, and that's precisely what he did, much more to the sharp end where we would expect to see Tony. So, as the checkered flag has come out, anyone that, of course, is still on a lap can complete that lap and the time would count. But the session, of course, was somewhat compromised and brought under red flag conditions, which meant there was some time lost. But as you can see, there are still plenty of drivers that are yet to cross the timing line, and until they do, we're not absolutely convinced of where we're going to be as Carlos de Quesada then heads towards the timing line. Is this going to be an improvement from Carlos? Can he take the P1 position? Well, the answer is no.
Not for this lap, but the good thing for Carlos is that he's starting on the front row. That is a mega qualifying for Carlos for today, who starts on row 1 or row 2 for both of the races this weekend. Fantastic effort from Carlos de Quesada.
And what could be really important, Shay, and I know that from a meteorological point of view, you've been studying this, is the fact that the weather conditions, certainly today, are not likely to get any better. In fact, they could be getting worse. So visibility, and if you're on the front row, of course, that you stand a chance, don't you, of not having spray from 36 or so other 4-a-day challenge Evos to affect you.
Yes, and I am an optimist, so I don't like the little black rain cloud hovering overhead, but I'm afraid there is a little black rain cloud coming in overhead. And in fact, it's very, very green on the radar, so there's a lot of rain in the area, and it's kind of swirling around, and it's looking more and more impending doom for race time. But I think that'll just make things more exciting.
It will add to a delivery of what will be an epic race, I'm sure. So, you can see there the number 21 car of Matt Gojewski, Ferrari Beverly Hills 146.668. So we did get into the 146s, albeit by one driver only. Then it was Carlos de Casado, as you say, brilliant qualifying. Jason McCarthy, Roberto Perina. The best of the Pirelli AM drivers, Brian Cook, ahead of Tony Davis and Mark Musso. For the Shell drivers, Cameron Root and Cyril Choksi, P1 and P2 within class, ahead of David Veronin, who was certainly in the mix. And then for the Shell AM drivers, Lisa Clark, Bruce Cleveland and Dan Cornish. That's the way it looks. We'll give you confirmation of that by the graphics that you can see on the screen right now. Now, bear in mind, this is qualifying 2, so Shay, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the session that will set the grid for tomorrow's race.
You are correct on that, and congratulations to Matt Gojewski, now with 4 pole positions on the season. So 4 poles out of 8 races. That is not a bad record. We've got Brian Cook with his 2nd pole of the year. A great effort by him. Cameron Root getting back to pole position form as he missed out on the one from today's race, but that's 3 poles in the last 4 events. And Lisa Clark, again, 4 pole positions for her this season. So she'll be making her Canadian coach, Kyle Marcelli, very proud by getting to the pointy end of the field, at least to start the race at one more time.
Lisa is showing such form this year. She's doing a lot of racing. She's not only racing in North America, but also selected European rounds as well. So getting a lot of seat time and actually doing a brilliant job in Ferrari Challenge. We have a race to come a little bit later. Please make sure you join us for that. From Shay and from myself, thank you so much for watching qualifying. Goodbye for now.